All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs podcast. This is the our regular week breakdown on Wednesday nights. This is the week 4 breakdown. We usually have at least 3 or 4 guys, but Peter and Bales are both traveling tonight to various places for business ventures. So you got just me and Tank tonight. Tank, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Like I said on the email, we got Kershaw and Puig holding it down tonight, but we're going to do what we do.
Since Peter and Bales are gone, we're going to revert back to the kind of the old format that we had, so I'm just going to go through the games and then kick it to Tank, and he's going to give his thoughts, and then I'll give my thoughts on the specific pricing and values that I see, and then we'll kind of move through the game. So we'll start with Thursday and then move on, of course, to the Monday night game. I have the lines, the Vegas lines, all updated through. It's about 9 o'clock on Wednesday night. So the only line that hasn't come out yet is the Cowboys Saints game, because I guess Vegas is waiting to see what happens with Breeze. So we're not sure about that line or what the implied points or spread or anything is. Probably not a big deal. I'm not sure if I want a whole lot to do with that game anyway, but we'll talk about that once we get there. We just won't have that data yet, but we'll tweet it out once we get it. So we'll start with the Thursday night game, which is tomorrow night. It's the Ravens at the Steelers. Interesting game because obviously Ben Roethlisberger is out, so we have Mike Vick starting for him. The over-under is 43.5. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites, despite being 0-3. Which is interesting, I guess, kind of the Michael Vick factor. So the implied points is Ravens at 23 and Steelers at 20.5. Tank, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, well, the first thing we have to address is just Big Ben being out. That's going to be a huge loss for that Pittsburgh offense, just because, I mean, the command that he had and what he was able to do with getting AB the ball, and now they had Le'Veon back after the suspension. So I think they're going to try to keep it real simple for Michael Vick. I think they're probably going to use a similar approach where they spread defenses out, and whether it's, running the ball with Le'Veon Bell out of those formations or giving quick passes to, AB and Marcus Wheaton and the rest of those receivers. I mean, I think that's how I see it going. As far as the Ravens, I mean, I think they're missing Crockett Gilmore this week. Forsett continues to get a decent amount of touches, but then at the same time, I mean, he really doesn't have the production that we've seen last year. I still like him just because he's touching the ball a lot, and I think it's just been matchups that's been slowing him down as of late. Mm-hmm. But I think this could be an interesting game where we could see a point explosion, even though, I mean, I guess, what did you say the spread was? I mean, I think it was like over on the 43.5. I mean, so they're expecting decent points, but I mean, it could end up being a lot more than that if a couple of those receivers break loose.
Yeah. So the 2 questions I wanted to ask about were one for each team. The first one for the Ravens is do you know anything about the new tight end Max Williams? Do you think, because Flacco is really targeting his tight ends, or he was targeting Gilmore and obviously Steve Smith. And obviously with Gilmore out more, but obviously the Steelers would probably try to take him away as much as possible. Do you think Williams, do you know anything about him? Do you think he can step in and take some targets?
I think he'll definitely get a lot of targets, just for the simple fact that the tight ends have been a huge part of the Ravens offense for the beginning of the season. Mm-hmm. I know he'll probably end up getting some touches along with the other tight end whose name is slipping me right now, but I think Max will likely be the guy. When Gilmore went out in the last game, Max got more of the targets than the other tight end. So I think he'll be a really good value. I mean, I think he's at 2,500 on DraftKings this week. Mm-hmm. So he could end up being like a great play at tight end, since the tight end roster isn't that amazing with Gronk being out this week. So, I mean, I think Gilmore could be a good play just based off game flow. I think Forsett could be a decent play. The only thing that concerns me about him is that sometimes when they do get near the goal line, they throw in Taliaferro for the goal line carries. Mm-hmm. And then you've also seen Buck Allen getting some touches as well. Steve Smith should be a great play. Pittsburgh, they've been taken advantage of at times on the outside by wide receivers. I mean, we saw it in week 1 with the Patriots, and then, we've seen a lot last year as well. I mean, that's one of their weaknesses. So I can definitely see Flacco targeting Steve Smith even more, with Crockett Gilmore being out and following up that big game from last week with another one this week.
Yeah, interesting. I do think Williams is an interesting play just because how they use the tight ends, and he's a big guy, so I think that he could potentially be a red zone target or guy he can be a dump off in the middle of the field. And again, at $2,500 at the bare minimum on DraftKings, where you're right, it's a pretty ugly tight end slate or tight end group this week with no Gronk and couple kind of iffy matchups for tight ends that he could be an interesting play because he really doesn't have to do much. I mean, just 4 receptions for 40 yards would hit value for him. So kind of low expectations, and I think that he could possibly hit that. So the question that I have on the Steelers side is obviously Vic. I think people might talk themselves into him because he's kind of the bare minimum. He's at 5,000 on DraftKings, which is the bear for quarterbacks. I'm not sure I'm on that play, but I think the question is how it's going to affect their 2 studs in Bell and Antonio. Do you think it's going to increase them because they're going to kind of rely on them more, or do you think it's going to just kind of hurt everyone but with the fact that Ben's out?
I mean, I think there's no arguing that Ben being out definitely negatively impacts Le'Veon Bell and AB's value. But then at the same time, Le'Veon Bell's a stud. Mike Tomlin and Chad Hale, they're going to make sure he gets his touches. So in that sense, I think he'll be fine. AB as well. I mean, a lot of his passes, I think, as Bell's has commented on a couple of podcasts, or most of his targets are within that 5-yard range from the line of scrimmage. And so those are safe passes. Those are like running plays. So he's going to continue to get his targets, continue to get his touches, and with the PPR format, he's going to still be a guy. I mean, I think when you compare an AB to Julio now, Julio definitely takes, a couple steps above him, but he's still a solid play. And if he happens to have his value reduced because of Roethlisberger being missing over the next couple of weeks, I think that's when people should really take advantage of him, because you can't recall right when the Steelers signed Michael Vick in the preseason, I think the first pass he threw was like a bomb to Bartavis Bryant. So he's not been Roethlisberger, but the offense is definitely in capable hands.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I was actually I was talking to Bells because I wrote like an article on Monday of this week of just kind of recapping week 3 and kind of my thoughts on my plays and where I went wrong, and just trying to look at my process of how I selected players and to figure out, why I made the good plays and why I made the bad plays, and just kind of looking at it that way. And honestly, I didn't have very much Devonta Freeman, who we'll talk about, once we get to that game. And I was talking to Bales, and he said that he had him all over in cash. And my question was, how'd you get to him? And he said that he liked the price. He didn't like the guys that were a little bit lower than him. And then one thing that he said to end it, which really intrigued me because I hadn't thought of this, was he said that he really likes running backs in that position when receiver, because you can't just stack the box against them. So he was saying that he really liked Freeman because Julio obviously is a guy that they're just going to pay so much attention to. So the fact that they'll be up and they have Julio that they've got to pay attention to means that they can't just stack the box on Devonta Freeman and just kind of like say, okay, beat us. So I think the same thing could be said for Antonio Brown. Just the fact that both are there, you can't take away one or the other. The fact that they're both on the team, I think that maybe they could be even kind of sneaky plays this week, because I think they might be lower owned, especially number 1 on a Thursday night, and number 2 because people, maybe their values diminish because Big Ben is out. So I think they could be interesting. I probably am going to fade the Thursday slate. I usually do that, and I just am not comfortable enough to probably put too many lineups in it. But it is intriguing with with the tight end on Ravens and then those guys. And
then I think one other play that may be good too is Heath Miller. I mean, when you think about young quarterbacks leaning on their tight ends, also quarterbacks that are coming in, backups who may not be as comfortable with the system as a starter. And so they always know where those tight ends are for the check down. So expect Le'Veon Bell to continue to get a lot of touches in the pass game with check downs. And then also Heath Miller could be a good play as well.
Yeah, great point. So let's move on to the next game. So we're at the Sunday games now. So the first one we'll talk about is the Jets at the Dolphins, which is the second lowest over/under of the day. So really low. It's at 41 right now. The Jets are just 1.5 point favorites. So implied points is Jets at 21.3, Dolphins at 19.8. So not a whole lot of points going around either way. Eric Decker, it looks like has not been practicing. Made Brandon Marshall obviously a kind of a must play in cash last week. I think he would probably be in a similar situation even with a low implied point total here if Decker can't go. But Miami is tough. I'm not sure how I feel about those players just because of that tough Jets D. Tank, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, the Jets D is definitely tough. I think they're ranked like 4th against the pass, and then they're around the middle of the road against the run. And, that Miami defense, I think they're second to last against the run. And just looking at how the Jets like to function on offense, they always like to establish the run first and then, just kind of play off that with the pass. I think have we heard anything about Chris Ivory yet this week?
I don't believe so. Yeah, he's questionable right now. He was limited at practice today. So he's questionable for Sunday, so we don't know.
Okay. Well, I think it's one of those things where if Ivory's out, you may be able to lean on Bilal Powell just because I think that he and Zach Stacy will probably get a good amount of touches. So they'll probably be cheap options. It's just one of those things where you don't know how many touches they're going to get, so you may not get the value that you're looking for on a draft that way. I really like Brandon Marshall just because the Dolphins are giving up some big plays. They gave up quite a few to Buffalo last week. Sammy Watkins was able to get behind the defense, and then Hogan was able to get behind the defense. And so if you're looking at someone that may be a cheap option and give you a big pop, it could be Devin Smith, filling in since Eric Decker on Anunwa isn't really that type of receiver. And I think Owusu is still down too. So Devin Smith could be an option for a cheap fill-in, looking for a big play. And then when you flip the script, as you said, they haven't looked good on offense. They haven't been able to run the ball effectively. They've been rolling in Lamar Miller, Jonas Gray, Damian Williams. And so with all those touches spread out, I really don't like any of those backs, especially against that Jets defense. We always looked at Jarvis Landry kind of like a Julian Edelman type player.
Yeah.
He still gets those targets, but he just hasn't had the production. The only guy who's been worthwhile for Miami to date has been Rashard Matthews, but then he's gone against that Jets secondary. So, they're really on a lot of great plays on the Miami offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. I don't necessarily hate Jarvis Landry. Obviously, he's not in a good spot against the Jets here. Who would take him?
I would think that they would likely put Revis on Landry since he's the shiftier guy. And then
so Landry's out.
And then they put Cromartie on Matthews.
Okay. All right. So then never mind. Yeah, I was going to say Landry is one of those guys. You're right. He doesn't have a ton of upside. He's been between 16 and 22 fantasy points in the first 3 games, and his lines are kind of identical. He has 8 receptions in each one. So I've used him a lot in cash games, not tournaments, through the first 3 weeks, and he's been great. Then he'll just hit value and nothing else. But if he's got Revis on him, then I am going to stay away this week for sure. So question for you.
One thing they could do is maybe have Landry, because he runs a lot of the slot too. They could put Buster Screen, the nickel, back on him, and they may double him in the slot, and then maybe put Revis on, say, Matthews, and then have Cromartie on whoever the other third wide receiver is. And so I think regardless, there's going to be some attention paid to Landry because he's in the receiving core.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't necessarily like any of that then. So question for you about the Dolphins. What's up with their run defense? You see, it's really bad. They got Cam Wake and Sue. They're thinking, before the season that they were going to be pretty good. Is it matchup based? Is it something you think is going to regress and that they'll end up being okay, or is it what sort of problems are you seeing on that?
I mean, it just looks to me like guys aren't getting off blocks. Guys aren't, penetrating and dominating on the other side of the line of scrimmage. I mean, when I was watching Carlos Williams, and that's another – oh, yeah, well, that'd be a different game. But Carlos Williams, I mean, the runs that he had against Miami last week were really impressive. He's a big dude, and then they're running those zone stretches where he can just carry it to the outside, and he'll pick a lane and go. And that was the thing. I mean, you don't have guys crossing the face, getting in the lane, stopping and running. So he was just stretching the ball out there. When he'll find a lane, he'll cut up and get decent yardages. And so until those guys, can get off blocks, penetrate, dominate on the other side of the line of scrimmage, they're going to have some problems against the run game.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, not a whole lot here that I like. Again, like you said, maybe the Jets running backs if we kind of have some clarity about how touches are going to be distributed. But other than that, probably going to look elsewhere in the slate for some options. So we'll move on. Next game is Panthers at Bucks, which is right now the lowest over-under at 39.5. So it's our first one under 40 this year. Not a good spot. Panthers are 3-point favorites, so that puts implied points at Panthers at 21.3 and Bucks at 18.3. Not a great spot for either team. The only player that I can even think about is Cam, just because he kind of went off last week and looked really good. But other than that, I think this might just kind of be a really sloppy, down to the dirt game.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like on paper. But then also, I mean, we've had those games where they expect a lot of points and that doesn't come to fruition. So it could be one where they're not expecting a lot of points and then teams explode.
It may be, yeah.
Those things where, I mean, we've seen Tampa's defense get scored on a lot, especially in that first game of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And, just looking at the Saints being able to at least keep pace with the Panthers last week, I mean, that shows that they could be scored on. I mean, when I look at the players or that we would likely want to touch for DraftKings purposes, I mean, I think you look at the Panthers defense just for the simple fact that they're playing a rookie quarterback. And so, they're playing a rookie quarterback with a young offensive line. They may be able to get some pressure on them, get sacks, get turnovers, maybe a pick six, something like that. So that's what you'll be banking on from them. I think Jonathan Stewart continues to get a lot of carries. He's shown some flashes in the run game, but not enough for me to really go all the way in on him. But he may be worth, peppering around here and there just because he'll probably be had at a decent value. He's going to get a lot of touches, and if they can get up and then run the clock out, he could get, a garbage touchdown or two. Like you said, Cam will be a good play. Greg Olsen, he's starting to target him more and get him more involved in offense.
Mm-hmm.
As far as on the receiving side, he's targeting Ted Ginn a lot, and Ted Ginn is starting to make some plays. I mean, of course, he'll run down the field and he'll stone hands and drop a touchdown here or there, but he's been able to separate from some of the defenders and become a decent play at wide receiver. He's about the only one that he really goes to on a consistent basis with deep balls.
Yeah. I was actually looking at that earlier. So Greg Olsen leads them in total targets, which is no surprise. And I actually think last week I didn't have a ton of Olsen, even though I should have, obviously. But I think there were some signs, even though he had a couple, down weeks. I think we saw signs where Cam was starting to really target him in week 2, and just, we just didn't see the numbers. But, probably if you would notice that, you would see, okay, probably those are going to come. So I think you're right. I think he's going to continue to target Olsen. But, yeah, I was really surprised because I was looking at the target breakdown for Carolina, and everyone is about there's only one person above 10 except for Olsen and Ginn. And Olsen has 32 and Ted, you're right. Cam is, for some reason, just targeting the heck out of Ginn. So I don't know what his price is on DraftKings, but he's at 3,400, so just about bare minimum. So maybe a really contrarian flyer in the Millie Maker tournament or something like that. Anyone on the Bucs side? Maybe no.
I mean, on the Bucs side, I mean, Panthers defense is tough. I mean, you just have to bank on V-Jax or Mike Evans, those guys getting behind the cornerbacks, making a couple of big plays like that. I mean, I think, the Buccaneers could likely move the ball down the field a couple times and get a couple scores in. But I wouldn't expect huge numbers from those guys, not at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Actually, I'm looking at our player ratings right now on Fantasy Labs, and actually from the Labs account, the Carolina defense actually has the highest ceiling projected for this week based on our models. So they're at 3,300, which is a lot less than Seattle, who I think will be popular going against a really bad Lions team. So I think Carolina could be an interesting defense that maybe people aren't quite as on because people will be so on Seattle. So I agree with you there. Cool. So let's move on. Next game is the Texans at the Falcons. We got a high over-under. It's at 47 right now. Falcons are pretty sizable favorites. Half points at Texans at 20.3 and Falcons at 26.8. Man, I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, what price would Julio have to be for me to not think about putting him in my lineups? And man, it was pretty high because that dude is crazy. Well, what are your thoughts on this game? Just keep on rostering Julio?
I think so. I think I mentioned last week that, I kind of like V-Jax and Mike Evans for the simple fact they were going against the Texans last week, and Jonathan Joseph has been known to give up some plays over the top. And there's not a receiver that I could think of right now with Roethlisberger being hurt that I wouldn't want to match up with him over Julio. I mean, Julio's just been a monster. And what I like about him is the way they're using him. I mean, it's very similar to how Antonio Brown is used in Pittsburgh. I mean, they run a lot of crossing routes with him, which are like running plays. So it's easy catches, easy targets. So he's getting a point for those. And then, they're using him on the deep go routes and the post routes and stuff like that too, the deep over routes. And so, I mean, he's just murdering teams on a regular basis. And he's too athletic, too talented for people to guard on one-on-one. So Julio is a must play until we see something otherwise. I mean, it's just simple. But then when you're looking at other guys, I mean, I think this is a decent game for Matty Ice. I think that they're going to continue to, give the ball to Devontae Freeman. And like we kind of talked about before we got on, with teams having to focus on Julio, they're not going to be able to stack the box and try to stop the run. I mean, so Devontae is going to be the one that's lost in the mix and has the better matchup if you're looking at, Julio being double teamed versus someone stacking the box trying to stop him. So he should get his touches and be a decent play this week too. And then when you flip it, if Arian Foster is back, I mean, the thing with Atlanta, that defense is much improved against the run and pass, but he's still not working with a full deck. And so they give up plays every now and then. And, I mean, it's easy for Arian Foster to break one here or there. So, I mean, if he's playing, he'll probably be undervalued if he's playing. If he's healthy, he could. I mean, he can do what he does. And then that's hit his head on the goalpost a number of times per game. So he could be a decent play. And then at the same time, in the same mode, when you're saying that they can give up plays every now and then, I think Andre could be a decent play too, even though you have to look at the quarterback getting the ball to him, who isn't the most accurate and effective quarterback that he can have back there.
Yeah, I agree. Foster is, I think he's doubtful right now, but definitely keep an eye on the news because if he goes, then obviously that's a guy you would want to target. I think it'll be interesting to see what people's reactions to the Freeman game last week is. Obviously I did a video last week just kind of breaking down the Thursday FanDuel ownership on the Thursday to Sunday slates, just because they don't have the late swap, so you can use their ownership to see kind of where because it's pretty predictive of where guys are going to be owned on Sunday on DraftKings as well. So I'm going to be looking heavy at that because I'm not sure whether people are going to think maybe the Freeman game was a fluke or and maybe they think the Houston D is good with JJ Watt, or if they think that he can do it again in his ownership. Watch for is to see how the public reacts to him. But yeah, I think that a Ryan Julio Jones stack is probably going to be really popular this week. Man, Julio's just so good. Like, Kyle Shanahan just must be sleeping so well these days. Like, all he has to do is just draw up a play and just throw the ball somewhere near Julio. The dude, I don't think he's dropped the ball all year. I mean, I'm sure he's dropped the ball, but like if it's within like 15 feet, he catches it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the thing is that everyone knows the ball is going to him, but you still can't cover him.
It doesn't matter.
He's still getting open. He's still catching the ball, and then the run after the catch is ridiculous with him. He's unbelievable, man. He's a stud.
He's so good, yeah. So this is, I agree on those. Definitely, I'm all over Julio yet again. I'm gonna be until, I'm not anymore. Which I don't think may be this season. If they're gonna keep him around that 9,000, which is just kind of around where you keep the elite receivers, and he's gonna continue averaging almost 40 fantasy points a game, I'm gonna use him in cash and tournaments, no problem. There's my thoughts on that.
One thing with Julio getting off like these first 3 weeks in a row, I think it may be due for like a Hankerson or a Roddy White to get off. The thing is that Roddy hasn't received a lot of targets these first 3 weeks. So if I was going to bet on someone else coming up this week, it would be Hankerson over Roddy White.
Yeah, I've been looking at the targets for all these teams, and you're right. Hankerson was next in line with targets, other than the running backs, who Matt Ryan's actually checked down to a fair amount when he couldn't get it to Julio or Hankerson. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about Roddy. I'm probably off him, but I don't mind the Hankerson play. I'm gonna see where he's at. He's 3,700, so he's really low. So another possible contrarian play. I don't mind at all. But I think the big thing for me in this game is target Julio and then wait to see what happens with Foster, and also wait to see kind of what the ownership is on those Thursday slates for Freeman. And then I'm going to kind of make my lineups based on that. But definitely a lot of potential scoring here with the Falcons at almost 27 implied points. Vaughn is even higher. We got the Jaguars at the Colts, and we got we got 2 double-digit favorites this week right now. But this is one of them. The Colts are 10-point favorites on that 4-point over-under. So the implied points is Jaguars at 19.8, and the Colts over at 29. So a lot of points expected for the Colts. They've kind of been underwhelming on their offense, but maybe this is a week for them to bounce back.
You would think that, because I think everyone's, in the mindset of last year, like, who's playing the Jaguars? But I'll admit that the Jaguars' defense is much improved. I mean, you'll look and say, oh, look what the Patriots did against Jacksonville last week, but Tom Brady does that to everyone. I mean, look how Buffalo's defense performed against the Patriots and then followed it up with their performance against the Dolphins. So, I mean, you really can't use that as an accurate sample. Jaguars, they've been good against the run this year. They've been able to get some pressure on the quarterback. And the Colts offensive line is their weak point. And so I think it won't be easy for Luck. I expect them to score a lot of points, but I don't expect it to just be a blowout. I think Jacksonville will play them tough. They have before in Indianapolis. So, I mean, as far as guys that I like in the game, I mean, it's one of those deals where you're waiting for Luck to get off. I mean, he kind of came along last week. I mean, I had a lot on Luck because I'm like, all right, this is the week. Like, he's going to go to and set it off. And then he just shit down his leg, and it pissed me off. But, I mean, maybe this is the week. And so, like you said, I mean, I like T.Y. too. I like Luck. I like T.Y. I mean, I like the way he's targeting Moncrief a lot. I mean, I like Moncrief. If you want to take a deep sleeper who may be cheap, it'll be Dorsett. I don't want any of Andre Johnson until he proves me wrong. Frank Gore looked good last week, but like I said, Jacksonville has been better against the run. I like Kobe Flynn. I liked him a lot last week. I mean, the only thing is that he's going to be the dominant pass catcher, but Doyle does get his fair share of targets. And so Luck goes through his phases where, I mean, he'll throw tight ends a couple touchdowns a game, and you just have to make sure you pick the right tight end the right week. And so hopefully it's this week for Flaner. And then when you flip it, I mean, Allen Robinson is their guy. Bortles is like locked on to him, like with laser focus, and so he's going to get his fair share of targets. It's just whether he can shake those cornerbacks and get deep every now and then. I think he has a decent game. I think Bortles has a decent game, but you always have to worry about him turning the ball over and making erratic throws. Yeldon has had some decent matchups. He really hasn't impressed me yet. I mean, he'll have a decent run here or there, but it kind of reminds me of Devontae Freeman the way he ran last year. I don't know if it was because he was banged up, but rookies kind of run unsure of themselves. But then once you kind of learn how you need to play to be successful in the league, you kind of get a little attitude, kind of how you saw Mark Ingram last year when he started running with force because he was in this contract, so he wanted to get paid. Kind of what you're seeing with Devontae Freeman now that Tevin Coleman's out, like he wants to be the man, and so he's running with attitude. Like if Yeldon did that against that Colts defense, I think he could have some success. But until he shows that, I don't think he's worthy of being played. And that may be about it on the Jaguars. I mean, Allen Hurns could come up with another big TD like he did against the Patriots, but man, I think this is a receiver that I want to own this A-Rob.
So who would you expect Vontae Davis to be on?
I think they just play sides, really. I mean, I think they play sides. And so they may be able to move Allen Robinson around. I mean, because Allen Robinson is a big guy. And, I mean, I don't think Bortles would, shy away from that matchup, like getting Allen Robinson down the field and throwing up a deep ball and letting him go up and get it over Vontae. I mean, Vontae is one of those corners where you hear a lot about him in name, and he's a good player, but at the same time, it's not like I would shy away from Davis like we do a Darrelle Revis. I'll put it like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good to know because, that was I really like Robinson this week. But, that was my worries that he was going to get shouted by Davis. So maybe I'm a little bit on him more now. I really like T.Y. He's one of my favorite wide receivers on the week. He's really cheap, actually, compared to some of these other wide receivers. He's only at 6,700 on DraftKings. And Moncrief is still low despite, kind of the uptick in targets. He's at just 5,000. Really don't mind double stack. Andrew Luck, T.Y., Moncrief double stack in the Millie Maker. And, maybe this is the week that Luck just goes bananas and throws 3 or 4 touchdowns and they go to those guys and all of a sudden you're sitting really pretty. So, I think it's going to be an interesting game, and those are kind of my thoughts on them as well. Anything else on that game, or you want to move on?
I think we can move on.
Okay, sounds good. Next one is Chiefs at the Bengals. In the middle of over-unders is at 44 right now. Bengals are 3.5-point favorites, so it puts implied points at Chiefs at 20.3 and Bengals at 23.8. So according to the spread, it looks like they assume that these teams are pretty even on a neutral field, considering it's being played in Cincinnati, which is interesting to me. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on these two teams going at each other.
I mean, well, everyone expected that Chiefs defense to be tough, and it may be because they played Denver and Green Bay early in the season, but right now they're ranked like 24th in total defense and 28th against the pass after Aaron Rodgers carved them up last week. I believe they get Sean Smith back this week, which will help that pass defense. I mean, but they have a tough matchup against Cincinnati. Like, I looked at them in that game against the Ravens last week, and they look really good. I mean, I think the first thing we need to address is the Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard situation. And Jeremy Hill started the game. He got his fair share of touches, but Gio was more effective. And then he's also, more involved in the passing game. So I think I like Gio a little bit more right now. Hold on. We got the Kansas City. Oh, yeah, they're playing the Bengals. All right. I almost got mixed up a little bit. Making sure I'm talking about the right team because I see the Ravens and Bengals highlights on right now.
Hell yeah.
But then when I look at the receivers, I mean, AJ can have another monster game this week, especially if that secondary is still banged up. I mean, he looked really good against Baltimore and made some phenomenal plays. Who's a sleeper who's up and coming is Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones, his targets have continued to increase over the the weeks. And I really liked him 2 years ago when I think he caught like 10 touchdowns and he was all banged up last year. Dalton's looking to him a lot. He's definitely secured that second wide receiver role. And, they have Eifert. They have Sanu, who he tried to get more involved this week. And so it's one of those deals where AJ is going to get his touches. Eifert, he's definitely looking at him consistently in the red zone. So, Eifert may be a good play this week with Gronk being out. But Marvin Jones could be a sleeper against that Kansas City defense, because more than likely Sean Smith would be on A.J. Green. Mm-hmm. So they'll have the second cornerback, which would be Peters, who's played okay, but he's a rookie, on Marvin Jones. And so if the banged up or the weak link is in the slot, maybe Sanu is the best play, and he's probably really cheap. His value is probably somewhere in the 3,000s on DraftKings. So
yeah, he's 3,100.
Yeah, Sanu may be the guy this week. When you flip the script, Jamal Charles, the offense runs through him, so he's going to get some touches. That Cincinnati defense has been tough. Geno Atkins looks like he's back to his old form, and so it's been tough for teams to run against him. You look at Justin Forsett as like a broke man's Jamal Charles, and he wasn't able to get anything going last week. And so I think Jamal does a little bit better just because of the sheer amount of touches and how involved he is in the offense, but I wouldn't expect huge reduction from him. And then, it was crazy. Sometimes if you look at last year, like Martavis Bryant and some of these other guys were able to get behind the Bengals secondary. So a fast receiver that's on the outside can get by them every now and then. And you look at what Steve Smith did last week, they just don't target Macklin enough for me to buy into him right now. He could be that guy, but can Alex Smith give him the ball, and will they target him enough? So I really don't like them. I think I like Kelsey or Jamal Charles. I'm going to play anybody.
Yeah, that is the problem. Yeah, you're right. If they get behind the defense, can Alex Smith even get it to him? And Alex Smith just hasn't shown that he's going to throw those deep balls.
Yeah, Alex Smith is out.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I agree. I think I'm on AJ. I really like your Sanu pick, actually. I hadn't really thought about that because, the slot thing. So that's going to be something interesting that I'm going to look at pretty heavy in the next couple days. But yeah, you're right. The Chiefs, I'm not sure how I feel about them going against the Bengals. I'm like really desperately looking for a tight end because Gronk's out and just kind of the matchups. So I was looking at Eifert and Kelsey, but I'm not necessarily in love with either one. I don't think.
I think. But yeah, you just have to look at guys that are going to get heavily targeted, and just hopefully they be in a situation where they get a couple tubs this week. And so, when you're looking at guys, I think Eifert's going to get his targets per usual. Kelsey's going to be the same way. Maybe Heath Miller because of that Mike Vick situation. Greg Olsen, stuff like that. So I think just to be safe, you kind of trend towards those guys where the targets are going to be there, and just hopefully they're the ones that get in the end zone on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Sounds good. Move on. Next game is Giants at the Bills. We got over under 46 right now. The Bills are 5.5-point favorites at home. Giants are implied points 20.3. Bills is looking like, I actually think it's actually announced for sure that LaShawn McCoy is going to be out. For some reason, there is just continually under 6K. So both him, he's under 6K, and then let me look at his price. Carlos Williams, $3,400. So it looks like this is going to be the week of Carlos Williams.
Absolutely, it's going to be, because the Giants, I think, are ranked 31st in total defense this year so far today. And like we talked about in the last game, I really like what I saw out of Carlos Williams. And so Rex Ryan and that offense, they're going to want to establish the run against the Giants, just because they're a team similar to the Packers when you think about their offensive philosophy, trying to spread teams out, move the ball around a lot, and with a good pace. And so I think Carlos Williams is going to be the guy this week, just like you said. He's cheap. He has a really great matchup, and I think he gets off. And just talking about the Giants defense being ranked 31st in the league to date, I think these Bills can be, really good plays. Like you said, Tyrod Taylor is still a really good value on DraftKings. And watching him against the Dolphins, you just can't look at him like he's just some athletic quarterback that they just haven't run around and then he's just getting lucky. Like, he's making good throws from in the pocket. He's moving around. They have guys running a lot of crossing routes like Percy Harvin and Charles Clay. Those guys are getting open. So he's running offense effectively, and he's putting up big numbers each and every week. And so as long as they continue to have him at a value and he has great matchups, I don't see why you don't play him. I mean, so I think he may be a must play in some lineups this week. Charles Clay could be another good play.
Yeah, I like Charles Clay too.
And with Sammy Watkins out, I mean, I saw one drive where, he targeted Percy Harvin a few times in a row, but I really don't like those receivers. I really don't. I mean, I don't know if it'll be Percy Harvin or Robert Woods. So I think Charles Clay, Carlos Williams, Tyrod Taylor on the offensive side of the ball for them. I mean, whenever you're talking about the Giants, OBJ, I mean, regardless of what defense he's facing, like I said, I had him on my fantasy team last year, and you saying to yourself, this has to be the week he doesn't get off, and then he gets off. I mean, I don't put him in a category with Julio, but at the same time, I think he's worked his value each and every week. Victor Cruz remains out. I really don't like Ruben Randle. He had a decent game, but some of those catches look lucky to me. I mean, he really didn't do anything to separate from cornerbacks. He didn't show me any flash or athleticism. So, I mean, he's their second wide receiver, so he has to get some touches, but I don't like him. I liked Larry Donnell last year. I mean, he gets his touches, but he's been inconsistent catching the ball, so they've been integrating Fells into the passing game more. So I really don't like him that much. I think wide receiver-wise, pass catcher-wise is OBJ. And then they're rolling those backs through there like a committee too. So, I mean, I really don't like any of those. I mean, the one thing you can say is that Andre Williams gets the touches in the red zone. But other than that, I mean, I really don't like those guys either.
Yeah, me either. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be on a lot of Giants this week. Probably maybe Odell in a lineup or two just because. But yeah, I think – say what?
I said, yeah, go contrarian because, I mean, everyone's expecting him not to do anything against that tough Buffalo defense. So maybe he gets off and he's not as heavily on as he usually is.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind that. I kind of like targeting the elite receivers against bad matchups because, I mean, they're elite for a reason. They could go off against anyone. So I don't mind that. But, yeah, I'm definitely going to target Tyrod and Carlos just about everywhere, especially in cash games. In tournaments, I assume they're probably going to be really high owned. But it probably doesn't matter for Carlos. The interesting thing is going to be, if it was and a running back from the same team that are just such amazing value and such a good a matchup. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, which one do I play? Because obviously the quarterback and running back have a negative correlation together. You probably don't want to take them in the same lineup because they like steal each other's touches and touchdowns. So the question is, which one do you pick? And I actually wrote an article today about the winning DraftKings lineup this last week because, all of these pros and stuff like I admit that I've written as well, have said, never take in the game because, the game script is just, it's not a good situation for you to be because it limits your upside of your lineup. And then this guy takes Joseph Randle and Devontae Freeman in the lineup and scores 301 fantasy points and wins $1 million. So then it's like, okay, we'll need to rethink some of these ideas. So I'm really interested. I think, I don't know. I'm really interested in the idea, and this is something I'm going to put a lot of thought into. Can we play Tyrod and Carlos in the same lineup? I don't know.
I mean, but if you're looking at the number of points that Buffalo's been scoring, I mean, they scored like in the high 30s against New England. They scored in the high 30s against the Jets last week. I mean, so if you have like, 5 touchdowns that are going to go around and you could say that, Carlos gets 2, maybe Tyrod throws for 2 and runs in for 1. I mean, those are really good stat lines for both of those guys. I mean, so is it justified that way? I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, this is something I'm going to have to think about. And I'll get you guys my thoughts later on in the week. I'll talk to Bales and Peter and kind of get their thoughts, even though they can't be here. I was hoping that they would be able to, because I really wanted to ask him about this specific question as well. But I'll get up with him and then kind of give you my thoughts via Twitter or an article or something, because I think that's going to be really interesting. And I agree with you. I kind of like the idea of using them both together, because I don't think a lot of people would, but I think they could just both go off. So that's going to be probably the most interesting game of the week for me. So something to monitor, and we'll get back to you on that. Next game is maybe the other most interesting game of the week for me, is the Raiders at the Bears. Over-under is 44.5, so it's kind of in the middle, but Raiders are actually 3-point favorites on the road, which is interesting. So Raiders are at 23.8 implied points, and Bears are at 20.8. And I got to say, I really love the Raiders this week, Tank. Are you going to talk me out of that, or are you going to affirm that for me?
No, I mean, I really like the Raiders too, but one thing I will say is that Bears defense plays Seattle tough, at least in that first half of the game, before Seattle was just too much for them. And so even though I like the Raiders, I don't expect the Bears just to be pushovers. I mean, I think they're going to come out there and give them, a gallant effort. And I do like Latavius Murray. I mean, I think that Bears run defense has been really terrible the past couple of years, and teams have been able to run the ball on them again effectively this year. And so I like Latavius Murray. I mean, Amari Cooper, what he was able to do against the Browns last week was just phenomenal, and I think that continues. I really like Michael Crabtree too, just for the simple fact that, even though Cooper's the man, Crabtree consistently gets targets. And I just think that this may be the week that, he gets off. I mean, he's had some solid games, but I think Carr really likes him. They liked him in the training camp and what he was able to do for the offense. And similar to how I felt like Keenan Allen had a bad game 2 weeks ago, and so Phillip Rivers is going to feed him and kind of get him involved last week, and he did. I'm looking for something similar for Crabtree this week. And then, of course, when we're talking about all these guys, Derek Carr, I mean, he's been impressive. To start the season, and he has a really great matchup. And so pairing him with Amari or pairing him with the Crabtree, I mean, I think that'll probably be, highly used this week as well. And then I think Cutler hit the practice field again this week. I'm not sure if he's going to play. If he's not going to play, so he just started practicing.
Yeah, I wrote a news blurb about it earlier today. He returns to practice, but is doubtful for week 4.
Okay, well then – offense is going to run through Matt Forte. I mean, he could be a good play just because, he's going to get a lot of touches, whether it's running the ball, trying to eat up clock, or if they get behind, regardless of the game flow, he's going to be involved. Martellus Bennett is going to be the same way. I think Alshon Jeffrey is still out too. And so with those other wide receivers, that's just a crapshoot. So I wouldn't touch them. If there's anyone on that Bears offense, it would be Forte or Martellus Bennett.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Forte could be interesting, because I think most people would probably just shy away from the Bears because they know they're so bad right now. But I think that he could be kind of an interesting contrarian guy, because he can do, with if they just dump it off to him and also getting the touches. I think one thing that's going to be really interesting to me is kind of the game script of how this game goes, because I think if Oakland gets up and they're obviously 3.5-point favorites on the road, which means that they're probably about better, says Vegas, on a neutral field. So obviously they think that they could potentially, be up by a little bit. So the interesting thing is going to be the game script. If they get up early, then that kind of turns into a Latavius Murray game. He got 26 touches against Cleveland last week. And if he's going to get 26 touches again, then yeah, I'm playing him everywhere, cash games, whatever. But yeah, if you're right, if the Bears play them tougher than we may think, tougher than even Vegas may think, and it kind of stays around, then maybe Carr, really goes after Crabtree and Cooper. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to try to figure out where they go.
Yeah, I mean, but even last week against the Browns, he had 26 touches, but at the same time, I think Carr threw for over 300 yards and a couple tubs, and so he still had a great stat line.
True.
I mean, those are maybe two other guys where we're looking at, Tyrod Taylor and Carlos Williams. Maybe these two guys in this matchup can be paired up and actually do well as well.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I'm thinking about all of that. This is another game where I don't mind a double wide receiver stack, like you said, with Carr, Cooper, and Crabtree. And if I don't go that route, then I'll probably have Murray. I'll probably have some form of this game in just about every lineup, whether it's with Cooper, Crabtree, or Latavius, just because I think that the Raiders are in such a good spot. So I'll kind of filter my lineups with those guys. So we'll move on. We'll go to the next game, which is Eagles at Redskins, and this is a pretty high over-under. We got 47. The Eagles are 3-point favorites on the road, which is a little interesting to me. So the Eagles are at 25 implied points, and the Redskins are at 22 implied points. I got to be honest with you, Tank. Like I don't understand either of these teams. I really just don't understand this entire division at all. Like I think that maybe none of these teams are really any good.
Right. I mean, it's hard to refute that, especially from the performances we've seen today. And I think one of the most surprising things to me is how well Washington's defense is playing. Like early on, I was just betting against them because they've been so terrible, but they're actually, ranked fairly high in total defense and in pass defense in the league today.
Yeah.
So that's been one of the most shocking things. And so I'll be interested to see how the Eagles perform against them. I mean, they were able to get the running game going a little bit better last week against the Jets with the combination of Sproles and Matthews. I mean, regardless of what DeMarco says, those two guys are like they're better fits for that run game. Or either Chip just knows how to, work the athleticism better into the scheme. Mm-hmm. And, Bradford still makes some dumb throws. He still misses some throws at times. And so, I mean, that's a little perplexing. But at the same time, I mean, that offense, especially if they can get the run game going, they're going to have to focus in on that. They get the matchups that they want outside with the quick throws. And so if that ends up happening, he could have some success. They just haven't really showed a lot of that consistently to date. The Redskins have been a monster running the ball. And so the only thing is like, who's going to be that guy? I mean, that may be a thing where I'm not sure that price, but Matt Jones, Alfred Morris, probably Matt is going to be priced a little bit lower than Alfred. But, I mean, it seems like they want to get, Matt more involved in the run game than Alfred. So, I mean, I think if Matt is, the cheaper option, I'll probably lean more towards him. I really like Jordan Reed just because they really don't have too many options in the pass game. And with Kirk Cousins, being able to throw the ball deep that effectively, he's been wearing people out with Jordan Reed running over routes and short cutoff routes and stuff in the passing game. And then if there's going to be a wide receiver, Pierre Garçon, maybe he's lined up against Maxwell Toast, and he continues to turn that thing going on, the beginning part of this season. So, I mean, I think the guys on Washington are, one of those running backs. I mean, you just got to choose the right one, Jordan Reed or Pierre Garçon maybe as a deep sleeper. And then for Philly's offense, depending on what DeMarco Murray's availability is, Matthews and Sproles are still cheap options. Matthews, he's heavily targeted in the slot for Philly, so he has to get off sooner or later. I mean, this may be a decent matchup for him. And then maybe Zach Ertz just because he's cheap because he hasn't done anything, but he really hasn't been targeted enough for me to want to, include him in my lineups yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like I'm looking right now. It looks like DeMarco is on track to play this weekend. So that'll that drops Matthews and Sproles probably out of people's lineups, but I don't necessarily like Murray either. The Redskins, I think they're 5th in DVOA in rushing DVOA defense. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really big on this Philly offense this week. They do play up in pace, so I think it's why you usually want to target guys from them. Even though I don't like them, I do like the fact that it might increase the pace of the Redskins, and as a result, yeah, I think Reed might be in this really bad tight end group this week, and I think Reed might be my favorite guy because he's getting targeted so much by Cousins. But
yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, cool. Any more thoughts on this one before we move on?
just looking at the defense, I mean, I don't really think any of these defenses are. I mean, whether it may be Philadelphia. Now, that's one thing that we can touch on and almost missed that. Like Washington's special teams, I mean, they're improved this year, but the past couple of years, they were one of the worst ones in the league. It takes some time in order to draft the right guys to improve your special teams. So even though they haven't been scored, well, have they? I don't think they've been. Oh, yeah, Landry ran one back week 1. I mean, so maybe play Philly's defense against them and expect Kirk Cousins to throw you a pick 6 or Sproles to return another kick. So that could be another play. I'm not sure where their defense is priced, but that could be a cheaper option that allows you to pay up in other positions.
Yeah, let me see where the Eagles' defense is. Yeah, oh yeah, they're real low. They're one of the lowest defense of the weekend. They're at 2,700. So yeah, so I don't necessarily hate that either. I agree. I really like that idea. I think most people pick their defensive plays in DFS and really in fantasy in general based on the defense part of it and kind of ignore the special teams part of it. But I actually think the special teams part is kind of what gives you the most points. And I believe, even though I could be wrong on this, I think the Eagles' defense actually finished as the #1 ranked defense last season, even though you don't kind of consider them a great defense, but it was just because they had so many touchdowns. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a great way to kind of think about it. Whether they can, whether a defense is in a good spot to get takeaways and maybe a return touchdown or something. And whether that puts them in position, especially in a tournament where you need the upside of, you probably need your defense to get a defensive touchdown like the Seahawks did or Landry did against week 1 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah. So, so I definitely agree on that. So I don't mind the Eagles defense. And Jordan Reed is a guy I'm probably focusing on probably in a bunch of my lineups. So we'll move on. Browns at Chargers. Over-under is 45 right now. Chargers are pretty heavy favorites. They're 8-point favorites. And so that puts the Browns at a really low 18.5 implied total. And the Chargers at 26.5. So they're up near the top of the list on their end. Okay. So what are your thoughts? Maybe some of the Chargers could be a sneaky play this week, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially after seeing how, successful the Oakland wide receivers were against the Browns last week. I mean, that makes you think that, Keenan Allen can follow up last week's game with another great performance. Malcolm Floyd is always known for catching balls over 20 yards or something like that, and so he could catch a couple of deep balls. I think Stevie had a really, kind of subpar average game last week. So maybe he gets more involved in the slot. Those are some of the things I'm looking for and that I want to continue to watch more and more tape. Just kind of get a feel on how they're going to, attack that Cleveland defense. We always look at Woodhead as a lower priced running back who has a pretty high floor just because of the way they use him in the run game, in the pass game. If you're thinking about them playing with the lead, or is it going to be a little bit more Melvin Gordon than it is Woodhead this week? I mean, that could be a play. And then also that Browns run defense has been pretty terrible. And so if they can get up and then they just try to get Melvin Gordon going, then, I mean, maybe he has himself a game. Maybe he's the kind of cheaper option that gets off, and this is his day to bust loose for 100-plus yards, a couple touchdowns. Flipping the script, really don't like the Browns running backs. I mean, if anyone, I guess it may be Duke Johnson if they're playing from behind and he's involved in the passing game. Benjamin, I mean, he still got a touchdown, but he didn't have the number of explosive plays that he had early on in the week. I kind of figure that he'll come back down to earth here soon. The tight end really got off last week, Barnidge, but I don't know if he'll be able to follow up that performance. So, I mean, I think if you're on anyone, you're probably on a lot of the Chargers more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I don't hate Benjamin this week just because I think he'll have some opportunities. Even though you're right, he's probably going to come back down to earth. He's still getting a lot of targets. And, if you're kind of looking for contrarian plays, I don't mind him. I definitely wouldn't play him in cash games, but in a big GPP where you're kind of just looking for contrarian plays at wide receiver. I don't hate him as much as some other guys in his price range. Keenan Allen, I really do like. I believe he's still like fairly inexpensive for like where he should be at. I believe. Yeah, he's only $7K, which is, puts him right around the TY Jordan Matthews range. So I kind of like a bunch of those guys this week. Usually I'm not like a big fan of the middle tier wide receivers, but I think they're all in some good matchups. So I don't mind some Keenan Allen. What's going on with the tight end situation? Is Ladarius Green cleared back?
I heard he was improving, but at the same time, he hadn't been cleared yet. And I think if he's cleared and if he's playing, I mean, he's definitely a good option. He'll be cheap. And Rivers is targeting him a lot in the open field on seam routes and in the red zone as well. So if he's playing and he can stay healthy, I think he's a great option. But, I mean, that's just an unknown right now.
Yeah. So if they get up big, which Vegas is thinking that they're going to, who do you think gets kind of the carries in the second half? Do you think it'd be Gordon?
I think it's Gordon. I mean, Woodhead's a smaller back, and he'll get his touches just because they like to roll those guys in and out. But I think Gordon really hasn't had a game that, can establish him and give him a lot of confidence. And so when you get up early in the season and you have a young player, that's what you want to do. Give him confidence that he can build and carry on to the next game. So I think in that situation, if they do get up by a touchdown or two and they're just trying to run it, get out the clock, they try to feed him and establish one with him and give him momentum for that offensive line and for Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, I agree. I think it might be a good confidence game for him. And I'm sure he's probably not crazy expensive. Let me see where. I agree on those points. So let's move on. We got an inch.
100, yeah,
4,900. So I don't mind that. Really interesting game here, actually. Packers at the 49ers. Pretty high over-under. It's 47.5. Packers are 8.5-point favorites, so it puts them at implied points on the road at 28, which is the second highest behind the Colts. And then the 49ers at 19.5. I've actually seen a lot of people really like Kaepernick this week, even though, there's kind of a and predicted by Vegas not to do really well, but it could be interesting. It looks like Devontae is going to be out, so a lot of interesting plays. I think hearing a lot of value in this game. What are your thoughts?
Well, I really like Aaron Rodgers. I don't think why. Like that dude. Honestly, I mean, like he's probably the best quarterback that I've seen in a while. I mean, the thing is that, you always go by like, oh, who has the rings? Like, of course, like Brady and those guys have more rings, but just the command that he has of that offense and the way that he just throws people open on a consistent basis. I mean, that dude is he's the shit, man. Like, A-Rod is that dude. And so I really like him. Like, regardless of what his value is, like, I'm pulling them duckies out of my pocket and I'm paying for him. He's like Julio. Like, I'll pay up for him all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. The other guys, I mean, I love him too. Randall Cobb, I mean, you saw what he did in the red zone. I think he's going to go to him early and often. I really like James Jones with Devontae being out, just because, man, those 49ers cornerbacks have just been abused. Like, they've been abused this year, and now they're playing the most potent offense that they're going to see in 2015. So it's going to be ugly. So I like both of those guys. I mean, if you're talking about stacking with a quarterback and 2 wide receivers, I'm all over that. Then Eddie Lacy, I mean, he's going to get his touches, whether it's in the run and pass game. Now, the Niners' run defense is usually fairly stout. I mean, but then you saw Chris Johnson went ham on him last week. So, and then with everyone trying to pay attention to trying to stop the pass, that means that, Lacy may see, those 7-man boxes, which will let him just go crazy. And then when you're talking about Kaepernick, it kind of makes sense just for the simple fact that, they have Julius Peppers, they have Clay Matthews, They have like Perry, these other rushers. So, Kaepernick is going to be pressured a lot. So he's going to have to, I think the offense coordinator is going to try to, move him around, have him thrown on a run and rollouts. And a lot of times guys are going to be covered. So Cap's just going to take it and run for yards and get down. So his rushing yards are going to be up. He likely runs for a touchdown this game. If the Packers get way up, which they probably will, he'll end up getting some garbage touchdowns. So, Cap could be a decent option, not just because I think he's going to ball out, but just because of game flow. I think he may just get some garbage yards, touchdowns, and stuff like that. As far as, Hyde could have a really good game because, they're going to at least want to establish the run early on, just try to slow down the pace of the game and keep Aaron Rodgers off the field. And if they can do that, Hyde can have, decent numbers. I don't think he throws up anything close to what he did against Minneapolis, but they would like for that to be the scenario. And then the wide receivers, they're going to have to try to throw to stay in it. I think if they need big plays, they're going to want to go to Torrey Smith over Bolden. I don't know if Bolden's hurt or not, but he really hasn't performed like I expected him to this year. I expected him to be, kind of like in the Steve Smith mold. He can break out and give you some big plays every now and then, but be more of like the safety blanket for your quarterback. And it just hasn't happened for Cap and any of his wide receivers, except for that one big play he had with Torrey Smith in the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting guys. On the 49er side, Cap really does interest me. I think you're right that this might be a game where he's just kind of forced to get out of the pocket and do some things with his legs, which I think those are the games that he really has the potential to kind of explode in fantasy world. And I think maybe this is a game where he's kind of forced to do that. So I think maybe he's interesting. Our models at Fantasy Labs, a lot of our models really like him this week. So I wasn't crazy on him before, but just kind of looking through our models, he keeps popping up. So he's a name that I'm going to keep in mind in tournament. I'm kind of all over Eddie Lacy this week. I think with the high spread, I think that maybe Rodgers goes off early and then they just kind of give it to Lacy and just say, hey, finish the game for us. So yeah, I'm really all over Eddie Lacy, and especially because he's had two really underwhelming games. He left 2 games ago after just 3 or 4 carries because of the injury, and then last week split the carries. So I think people might be down on Lacy, even though I think he's probably. It sounds like he's healthy and ready to go this week. So I think he might be under-owned. So I really like him, but yeah, obviously Rodgers is ridiculous. Hey, did you see that weeks ago when he was rolling, he was like moving in the pocket, he stepped left and then had to take 2 steps backwards, and as he was stepping backwards, he threw it like 40 yards to James Jones in between 2 defenders for a touchdown.
Oh yeah, when the guys jumped off sides?
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I was like, I don't even know how anyone makes that throw.
And he makes it seem so easy. And that's the thing, he does it all the time. And every time a defense jumps off sides, that's what I'm talking about. Like, a guy would be running, and if he's covered or not, he will throw you up. And whether it's leading the receiver or putting it back shoulder or having it go up, the receiver go up and gets it. It's unbelievable what he's able to do on the football field. And when you see him walk around, they say he has that air of confidence. Damn, that dude's cocky, but he deserves to be cocky because he's shit.
Well, and yeah, and he's dating Olivia Munn, so that helps.
That doesn't hurt.
Well, yeah, he's kind of he's like the football equivalent of of Steph Curry. I don't know if you follow basketball, but people, basketball followers say that Steph can't take a bad shot. Just because he's just that good. I think A-Rod's in that territory where he really can't take a bad throw. Any throw downfield chance, I can live with the results if I'm the offensive coordinator, because I know that he's probably going to put it right on the money. Yeah,
and I think it's one of those things too where they were kind of talking about the similarities where they both have the quick release, but I think what it really is just the command of their schemes. Rodgers knows where everyone is going to be. He knows what the defenses are trying to do to him. And so that's how he's always able to throw guys open, because he knows the weaknesses in each defense, and he knows the strength in each player. And so if they're in a specific defense, like if they're in cover 3, he's going to go to James Jones on the outside because he know he could throw the back shoulder, or he could throw the ball up and let him get it. If guys are going to try to cover them man-to-man in the red zone, then he's going to put Randall Cobb in the slot and just run them in quick outs because no one's going to be able to keep up with him, and then he can just dart into the end zone. So he knows what those matchups are going to be, and if you try to disguise it, he's going to figure out the tail last minute and get the ball in the hands of the right guy. And so, I mean, he's tough. I mean, that's how Peyton Manning used to give me fits when we played against him twice a year when I was in Tennessee. I mean, that's what A-Rod's doing, but I think even on a higher level, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, you can tell with Rodgers, if you just kind of watch him at the line of scrimmage, there's some plays where, even you're like, okay, he's already won this play. It hasn't even started yet, but he's already knows what he's doing, and that the fact that it's going to go for a catch. Yeah, he's unbelievable. So let's move on because we could probably just talk about about this subject all night. So we got a couple more. We got 4 more games left, and then we'll wrap it up. So the next one is Vikings at the Broncos. Over under is low. It's 43. Broncos are pretty sizable favorites at 6.5. So the Vikings are at 18.3 implied points, and the Broncos are at 24.8. What are your thoughts on this one? Even though the Broncos are kind of sizable favorites at 6.5, it's still maybe a little low for me, I think.
I mean, this may be the first time that I start off with the defense because I really like the Broncos defense. And
I do too.
This for the simple fact that, Stafford has been harassed this entire season. And honestly, I don't know if he's going to make it to the end of the season. I mean, he's just been beat up. I mean, he's been pressured consistently, and that's caused like turnovers and stuff like that. And so, I mean, I'm expecting more of the same this week. I mean, I think that hold on. I always mix it up now. We're talking about the Broncos.
Vikings, yeah. Bridgewater.
The Vikings, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I almost got on my Stafford kick.
We'll get to Stafford, don't worry.
Good. But, I mean, the Vikings are the same way. I mean, I think that, I still like Adrian Peterson just for the simple fact that they're going to want to slow down the rush, and they're not going to try to put too much on Teddy. And so they're going to try to establish the run. And even though the Broncos are, pretty solid this year, they've given up some plays in the run game. When I look at, Denver, the Vikings defense, I played them a little bit last week just because I figured that they would be able to pressure Rivers and get a turnover, maybe get a score, and that's what they were able to do. But at the same time, I think that they can be taken advantage of on the outside in that Demaris and Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, people may look at it like it's a tough matchup, and they could end up being sneaky good plays. That Minnesota run defense is pretty bad. I mean, I think they were ranked 18th in the rush defense last year. And you saw what Carlos Hyde did to him early on in the first game. I think with teams trying to focus on stopping Demarius and Emmanuel Sanders and having 7-man boxes, this could be the week that C.J. Anderson gets off. And I mean, I'm not sure if he goes crazy for like 120 and 2 tugs, but I mean, I think he could maybe have a decent stat line with maybe, 16 to 20 carries, like 70 to 85 yards or so, and a couple of touchdowns. And I mean, I'm not sure where is he valued at right now. I think he's at
probably around 6 somewhere.
He's at 5,900. So I mean, I think
that's real low.
5,900. I mean, I think I'll be all over C.J. Anderson. So Peyton, C.J. Anderson. I like the 2 wide receivers. If you're looking at the Vikings, I like Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wrote a news blurb on the Fantasy Labs news site today. The Broncos defense has pressured quarterbacks on 50% of their dropbacks this season, which is like crazy high, easily number 1 in the NFL. And we know that kind of getting to the quarterbacks and pressuring them is a good way to cause turnover. So, yeah, I think that Broncos defense at 3,300, they're obviously 400 or 500 less than Seattle, kind of in that Carolina range. I think they're definitely And they just look really good. I really loved Demarius last week. He was my favorite play, and I like him again this week just because, I mean, he's not in the Julio range, obviously, but there was a play where Peyton underthrew him, and he had a couple steps on the guy, and Peyton underthrew him, and Demarius kind of slowed down and still jumped over the guy and just grabbed it from him and then kind of just pushed him down and got to the end zone. So Demarius is just so huge, and he's just looked so good the last 2 weeks that I kind of have no problem rolling with him really in any format still.
Yeah, and I think one of the Vikings cornerbacks went down. I'm not sure what the injury was. I mean, even if both of those guys were healthy, I would like those wide receivers, but one of the starters goes down, so you have a backup in at the second corner. I mean, so that makes that matchup look even better.
Yeah, agreed. Cool. Moving on, we got 3 more games. We got Rams at Cardinals is the next one. One of the lower over-unders is at 42. Cardinals are 7-point favorites. So Rams are at 17.5 implied points, which is the second lowest of the slate. And Cardinals are at 24.5, which seems low because the Cardinals are apparently the greatest offense of all time. They go off every week. And so even though the Rams, we think they have a good defense, is this maybe a sneaky play to keep on going Cardinals?
I'm not sure, just because, I mean, the Rams, they're playing in Arizona, so that could play a part. But, I mean, they played the Steelers' offense tough even before Big Ben got hurt. I think the score was like maybe 9-3 or something like that. So, even though they've given up some yards and plays in some games like Washington and stuff like that, I still think the Rams have a good defense. And I think that the Rams are going to be the best defense that Arizona's played to date, because even though the offense looks amazing, who have they played? The Saints. They played the Saints and the 49ers, and who else? Who was the third team? I can't think of who the third team was, but all of those teams weren't that good, especially against the pass. And so that's why they were just able – the Bears. And so they were able to play those teams. And so this is going to be the best matchup they played. I still think, depending on if Ellington's out, I mean, Chris Johnson could be a sneaky play just because Arizona's offense has been so explosive that maybe the Rams pay more attention to that. And then Chris Johnson is able to get some running lanes similar to Alfred Morris and Matt Jones in week 1. But, I mean, I think Carson Palmer, I mean, he's probably been one of the most owned quarterbacks in DraftKings the early part of this season. This may be the week where everyone's on him, and I go to someone else just because I think this may be a tougher matchup for him, even though I still like Fitzgerald. And I think Bells was on that. And when I watched the tape from last week, I mean, they're using Fitz a lot in the slot. And whenever they're in the red zone, they're targeting him heavily. Like, so when you see a lot of teams, like when the Saints used to target Jimmy Graham in the red zone and how Tom Brady targets Gronk, like that's how Palmer is looking at Fitz in the red zone right now. So regardless of the matchup, I think he's going to get his looks just because he's a bigger body and those are tighter windows. And so he can like kind of block off the defensive backs and make it an easier throw for the quarterback. So that's why they really like him, since they don't have a dominant tight end in that offense. So that's why I really like Fitz. When you flip to the other side of it, I mean, that Arizona defense is tough. I mean, against the right-hand pass. And so Nick Foles, the last offensive play for the Rams, he had a tight end running down the seam. And I understand you like your tight end's athleticism, but there's a safety back in man free, and he floats the ball, and that's how they pick the ball off in the game. And so right when he made that throw, I said, that's why Chip Kelly traded your ass. Like, no good quarterback would ever make that throw. And then he made the throw. I mean, so Nick Foles, I'm off of him completely. I know we talked about, he has a great matchup, this and that. Like, Nick Foles, like, I'm going to keep my language clean, but, yeah, like, I'm not on that anymore. Like, damn. But, I mean, I really like what I saw from Trey Mason. I mean, they wanted to put Gurley in there. I don't think he has this explosiveness back yet, but Trey Mason does. At the same time, I mean, he has a really tough matchup, and they're going to be sharing those reps. So, not really on him. If anything, I would say Tavon just for the, the return aspect of it, along with they're always try to set up a few plays for him in the offense, but I'm really not on anyone for the Rams. I mean, nah, I'm not. So it'll be Fitz, and probably the Cardinals defense, and maybe CJ. I mean, and Carson would be a good play, but I think I would just try to go to a better option this week.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I'm on that too. I had a lot of Foles last week, and he burned me. And then after I said never again will I go the Foles route. I'm with you. I saw that last play, and because I had a lot of Foles stack, and that play it hurt my heart, man. It sucked. So I'm Foles is dead to me. This game, you're right. I don't think I'm going cash for any of these plays. I think you're right that Fitz is always kind of a good play just because of how heavily he's targeted, even against a good defense. So I don't mind him in a tournament by any means because he obviously has that upside. But you're right. I think kind of all of these plays are tournament only and no cash. So we can move on and finish up. We got two more games. This next one is Cowboys Saints, which as of earlier I was checking had no line posted. I'm going to double check one more time and make sure that it hasn't come out since we started this podcast. So hang on. I know this is super exciting for you guys while I check for the line.
Yeah, and one thing that they said was that, Drew Brees felt really good throwing the ball and that, he likes his chances of playing this week. And, I mean, I know that's what they're waiting for as far as the line. But, I mean, if he plays, then that could be appealing. But the only thing is, I mean, he may if he's healthy. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. So it looks like they haven't released the line. So we're going on nothing here. So I don't know what the line or the spread or anything is. And like I said in the intro, I'm not sure how I feel about really any of these players. Joseph Randle went off and helped the guy win $1 million. But if you look at his game, he had those first 3 carries where he had like 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then after that he had like 14 carries but only had like 3 yards. He was awful. So I think a lot of it was kind of fluky luck. The Saints without Breeze, I don't think I'm really on anyone. It's I don't know, man. This kind of looks like an ugly game. Are you on anyone here?
No, this is an ugly game, and a lot of people may be off, so that may be a reason to try to hop on someone.
True.
I think, if I had to pick some guys, Mark Ingram, I think whether Drew Brees plays or not, they want to establish the run against Dallas. And so I can see this being a big Ingram game. If the Saints get behind, then maybe they, use a little bit more CJ Spiller. I thought I read an article about Sean Payton said that they need to integrate him more into the offense. But if I lean towards anyone right now, it'll be Mark Ingram. Cooks, I mean, I think his upside all depends on Drew Brees. So, and Drew Brees, he may play and he may not be healthy and be able to throw the deep ball. So, I mean, maybe you're off both of those guys because they won't give you the upside that you need. Flip the script. We damn well know that we're not touching Brandon Wheaton. Or, I mean, honestly, any of those guys. I mean, because you said Joseph Randle, I mean, it was only really those 3 plays. The rest of his carries were he was bottled up and he was just average. I mean, if Drew Brees plays and the Saints, get out to a big lead, then maybe Dunbar is appealing just because, Brandon Weed's the check down king, and I think he had like over 100 yards receiving last game. Maybe he can get a couple tubs and stuff like that just from pure check downs. But other than that, I mean, I think my only legitimate play would be Mark Ingram. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of on that. You're right. I didn't really think about Dunbar that much, but you're right. He did get a ton of targets. I think he may have got like 10 receptions or something like that, and over 100 yards. Yeah. Because Whedon just wasn't throwing downfield at all. I think the wide receivers only got like 4 targets in the entire game, which is insane that in an NFL game that could happen. So yeah, I'm totally off the passing game, but maybe if he checks down to Dunbar, he can kind of be a safe play. I'm not sure if he has a ton of upside. You're right, but maybe a cash game play you can hit value because he is only 3,600. So maybe I'm on the Ingram. I like that play too. Yeah. I hadn't thought about him a ton, but I agree that maybe they come out and try to establish the run, and just kind of bully up the Cowboys and make them defend and then make them come back with Whedon, and that probably sets them up well. So yeah, I think Ingram's an interesting play. I'm probably not touching anyone else. So moving on, it's the last game of the slate, and we'll wrap things up. It's the Lions at the Seahawks. This could get ugly. Over under is 43 right now. Seahawks are 10-point favorites. So the Lions are implied points lowest of the slate, and I think it might even be the lowest of the year so far. They're at 16.5.
Detroit?
Crazy. And Seahawks are at 26.5. So I think that there's some potential for some Seahawks players, but the Lions, man, 16.5 points. You would not think that an offense with Calvin Johnson would ever, be at 16.5 implied points. But here we are.
Yeah, and the thing is that he doesn't really have time to throw Calvin the ball. Like, he is under siege on a regular basis, and that's going to continue against one of the best front lines in the NFL right now. Like, Michael Bennett and those guys are going to be all over his ass, and he may not make it out of this game. I mean, we saw what the Broncos defensive line was able to do to them. Seattle trying to get everything back on track, and this game is Monday night.
Yeah,
in Seattle. In front of the 12s, feeding frenzy. Like this is gonna get ugly. So rightfully so, everyone's money should be on Seattle. I mean, we thought that about Chicago, but these guys really play in prime time. Like, I've seen like some teams go up there and like kind of hang with Seattle like in a day game on Sunday, but prime time, these boys come to play. So I was just thinking about how that offense has kind of struggled. Like, they haven't been able to run the ball effectively, and Russell Wilson really hasn't quite looked like himself. But this may be the game that everything comes together like butt cheeks in prime time, and that defense plays well, that offense goes ham, and Jimmy Graham catches a couple touchdowns, and Rawls comes out of nowhere and runs for like 240 yards like a Jonas Gray or something like that, something stupid. I mean, I can see all of that happening. Then probably the Seattle defense sending Matt Stafford to an early retirement. If there's one contrarian play you want to do, I mean, maybe Calvin Johnson gets off. People probably be like, but he's on Sherman. I mean, well, shit. Odell Beckham had Sherman last year as a rookie, and he was able to get some plays on him. And so, I mean, I think Calvin, if he has enough opportunities, he could put up a decent stat line. But that defense is going to be tough, and that's going to be their first primetime game. So, I mean, I think everyone is expecting Seattle just to ball out in all phases of the game.
Yeah, and I kind of think they will. It looks like so they said this. Yeah, last I see is that Lynch is 50-50 chance to suit up against the Lions. So obviously that is going to be the thing to monitor. And it looks like they said that Rawls would be the play over Fred Jackson, and Rawls right now is only at 3,000. So if we kind of get an idea that Lynch isn't going to play and Rawls is the guy that's going to get the touches, especially in a game with them being such a high spread. There are 10-point spread. Rawls is an automatic must play in all formats. You have to get him in all your lineups, because at that point he him and Carlos Williams combined $6,400 in that matchup. You can just kind of pick all the top wide receivers and everything. So I think he's a definite must play. I would say just because it's the Monday lineup, if you're going to do that, make sure you put him in your flex so you can kind of substitute out if you need to. And definitely do it on DraftKings, obviously. On FanDuel, I would really monitor before Sunday what they think that Lynch is going to do, and maybe take the chance in a lineup on Rawls, or maybe stay away if it's still 50-50, because you obviously don't want to get zero. So yeah, so I think it's interesting. I can't. I'm trying to think of a way that I would play any Lions players, and I just can't think of a reason I would.
Maybe, all right, let's say just based on game flow. I mean, they're playing from behind. Maybe a Theo Riddick is a cheap option where, you the pass catching back and comes up with a Lance Dunbar type performance. Or maybe you get Eric Ebron because the pass rush is just so ferocious that he has to throw a few checkdowns, and so he gets a lot of short, overalls and getting yardage that way. But yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, I can see some scenarios, but I just really expect that defense to come out on fire again. And so, regardless of what the production is for the Detroit Lions, I don't think it's anything that justifies paying for them in GPPs or cash.
Yeah, I agree. One more question before we leave. Joique Bell. I don't want to be. I hate being mean to players. I mean, obviously, Joique Bell's not watching or listening to this podcast, so it probably doesn't matter. But I just don't like making fun of people at their job. But why is he a thing, right? Like, why is he still playing in the rotation? That dude is not good.
Because they paid him. They try to get their money's worth. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where I had Joique Bell on my season-long team last year. And I mean, and when he was healthy, I mean, he was fun. He's not flashy, but he can run downhill, and he was decent in the passing game for a big back. I mean, he was like probably a poor man's Eddie Lacy. I mean, that's how I would look at him. But, he's coming off that hip surgery, and hips are tough. I remember having a couple of teammates that had hip surgeries, and they say that those are one of the toughest injuries to come back from. And you can see that he's not all the way back. He's not as explosive as he was last year. And so it's really one of those things where they're limiting the offense by keeping him in there. I mean, it really needs to be a heavy dosage of Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick in order for them to have the best offense out there on the field. And until they do that, whenever Joique Bell's in the lineup, I mean, that's one player that they just have to eliminate and don't worry about, so they can pay extra attention to Golden Tate and Calvin and Eric Ebron and whoever else they have out there at the other skill positions.
Yeah, I hear you. So I think we're done. Let me get a couple Ask Tank questions in here for you, so we can finish on that note.
Cool.
All right. So from Ryan D at Ryan Duvey, would you consider Julio Jones the single best cash game staple this week? And if not, who?
I think, as we alluded to during our talk about Atlanta, I mean, Julio is the new Antonio Brown just by the ways that they involve him in the game plan. A lot of times they're running him on a lot of crossing routes, short passes, and so he's getting volume targets and catches that way. And then also, I mean, he's the best deep threat in the game right now. And so, I mean, regardless of matchup, I mean, he's going to get off. And so, absolutely. I mean, I think he's like the number one cash play. And even at that $9,000 price point, I mean, I think you gotta lock him in because the value's there.
Cool. Sounds good. A couple more. From Sean Weaver, 386. Is the Falcons' defensive secondary extremely underrated? I want to use Hopkins, but I'm worried about Trufant shadowing him.
I wouldn't worry about Trufant shadowing him, but I will say that defense is much improved from last year where they finished dead last in pass defense. As you saw in the Dallas Cowboy game, I mean, they gave up a few runs. I think similarly, they can give up some plays in the pass game, as you saw with OBJ in that game, I think 2 weeks ago. I mean, so there are plays to be made, but at the same time, you have to think about who's throwing DeAndre the ball, and that's Ryan Mallett. And I mean, I really don't think he's consistent enough for my liking, but at the same time, DeAndre is such a talent that, I mean, maybe you get some exposure to him and expect them maybe to have a decent day. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I really think he could have a day, but just looking at Mallett, I mean, I think that's what it is. I mean, I really don't like Mallett, but I mean, he's worth having some exposure to. Yeah.
Cool. Fair enough. Got a question I'm not going to ask you to answer because we already got it. Thoughts on stacking Dalton, AJ, and Marvin Jones this week? I think we kind of went over that we really like Marvin Jones and AJ this week, and Dalton. So Nick Specca, yes. The answer is yes. We like that. And then last question, and we'll end the podcast. Alex Munoz says, hey, Tank, I liked your analysis on sneaky defenses to play in week 3. Any sneaky defenses in week 4 for you?
Oh, man, let me pull it up on DraftKings. I think we touched on one with the Eagles.
Yeah, Eagles was one of your sneaky ones you talked about during the show.
Let's see. Let me try to pick up some stuff just on the fly. Let's see who we have.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Okay, the Bengals at 2,800 against Kansas City. I mean, they're playing at home. I mean, that could be a good play just for the simple fact that Kansas City offense struggled up until the fourth quarter of last week. I would say the Packers against San Francisco after Colin Kaepernick threw a pick 6 to everyone except some of the fans last week. So, I mean, that's definitely an option too. And then also, I mean, I think that Raiders defense is much improved. The Raiders are sitting at 2,600 and against Chicago with Jimmy Clausen and, Alshon may not be back. So their skill players are limited there. So that could be a decent play. So I think, those are a few for you right there.
Yeah, perfect. I actually really like all of those. I think I might sprinkle in some tournament lineups. So cool. Well, thanks, Tank. I appreciate you coming on with me and doing it just you and me, even though Bales and Peter were lame and had to travel and sneak out on us. But I think we'll be back at full strength next week. We keep on asking questions. Hashtag #AskTank. And I'm sure I've seen him answer some on Twitter. I know he'll get to as much as he can with his time, and obviously we'll answer some on the podcast. But thanks for watching, Tank. Enjoy football this weekend, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, appreciate it, B.
All right, man. See you.